Hello YouTube! Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching this. My name is Bianca and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time, then come on in, take your shoes off, stay a while. Today is Wednesday, so that means I'm going to talk to you about a true crime story, an exoneration to be exact. So we'll be talking about somebody who was wrongfully charged or convicted of a crime and later proven to be innocent. I'm gonna also do my makeup for you and probably style my hair a little bit. So if you're interested in stuff like that, if you like true crime stories, if you like watching people do their makeup, then you should subscribe to my channel because those are the things that we talk about up in here. How are you guys? I hope you had a great Christmas, a great holiday. Kwanzaa started a few days ago, so happy Kwanzaa to those of you who celebrate that. Happy Hanukkah. I hope your holidays are going well. I'm actually really excited because the week that this is showing, it's the week that I leave for Africa. I'm going to a couple of places out there and I'm so excited. And I'll see y'all when I get back. But without further ado, we can get into today's story and start on the look. Today, we will be doing our first case about a woman exoneree. And surprise, surprise, we're going back to Illinois. I've read through a lot of cases, and none of them fumble the ball the way that Illinois fumbles the ball. Today we're talking about a woman by the name of Julie Rea Harper. Julie Rea was born in 1969. When she was about 18 years old, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy from her first marriage named Joel, and Joel would be Rea's only child. When Joel was 10 years old, Rea had been a PhD student at Indiana University. And so although she lived in a suburb of Illinois, she would often travel and stay on campus. She had divorced Joel's father in 2004 when Joel was about 7 years old and just went on to live like a quiet life in like a rural suburb of southern Illinois, where she just devoted a lot of her time to being a mom and making memories with Joel, her son. That is until the worst possible nightmare ever started for this woman. This case it's the worst one that I've seen, so brace yourselves. On the morning of October 13th, 1997, a neighbor named Lisa Bridget woke up at about 4:30 in the morning to the sound of Julie Rea, her next door neighbor, who was 28 years old at the time, pounding and screaming on her front door. So the neighbor wakes up and all she hears is shrieking and loud pounding noises. When Lisa opened up her door, Julie was standing there in a t-shirt and panties only. She was barefoot, she was looking frantic and screaming, yelling a bunch of stuff, but it was really hard to make out what she was saying because she was so worked up and she was speaking so fast. But clearly it was an emergency. That was easy to tell. In an effort to calm her down, the neighbor Lisa grabbed Julie and wrapped her in a bear hug. Lisa was able to make out the words from Julie saying that Joel is gone. Of course, Lisa grabs the phone, calls the police, and informs them of what just happened. When police arrive, Julie is more calm and able to talk, and she begins to tell police that she woke up in the middle of the night to hear screaming coming from her son's bedroom, and then she got up and ran over to see what was going on. When she approached her son's bedroom, she could see a man in a ski mask standing over Joel's bed, and he began to lunge at her. When the man lunged at her, Julie Rea, who had a black belt in Taekwondo, was like, "Come on with it." And she actually began to fight the man right then and there in the bedroom. They pretty much fought all through the house, all the way into the backyard. Like, from the moment that she woke up and ran into the bedroom and saw this man and he started attacking her, she started fighting him and did not stop until they made it out to the backyard. And while they were tussling back there, he was able to get a little bit of control and slam her head into the ground before taking off running. At that moment, Julie Rea thought that her son had been kidnapped because when she walked into the bedroom and saw the man in the ski mask, that's all she saw. She didn't see her son Joel in the room. Granted, who knows if like her first instinct was to like look for him because there was a man standing over his bed that was coming for her. And so I'm sure everything in her said like protect, protect, instinct, instinct. And because she was trained and skilled in what to do in situations like that, she began to fight. However, when the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department began searching and evaluating the scene, it turned out that Joel had not been kidnapped. They found Joel. He had fell on the side of the bed, in between the bed and a wall. His pajamas were drenched in blood, and unfortunately he had been stabbed 12 times. The police come outside after looking at the crime scene, walking through the house, and they inform Rea that her son has been killed. And she loses it. She was taken to the hospital because, remember, she had ensued in a tussle with this man and she had injuries of her own. So they take her to the hospital with a black eye, rug burns on her knees. She had a pretty severe wound on her arm that required stitches. And of course, like scratches and abrasions were on her head and her face, obviously where she got slammed into the ground. Because she was frantic, because she had just been told that her son was killed, because she had just been slammed into the ground and so many things were happening for her, she did not realize that police, they had different intentions when they arrived at the scene, and they started to look at her as a suspect. They started trying to find things to poke holes in her story. They had not been able to find any signs of forced entry into the home. Rea said that she could not remember if she locked the back door or not. Police and investigators kind of assumed that she did. And this is crazy because just last night I was up thinking, like, when I went to sleep, like, dang, I'm like one of those people where like I lock it 3 times, double check 3 times, and will still go to bed and be like, did I lock it? I get up and go check again. Or the same thing like with the car, when you walk away from the car and you push the button like 17 times. That's me. Now, Julie Rea hardly fit the profile of a woman who would do something like this, who would commit this type of crime and cause this level of harm to her child. She had no history of mental illness. She had no criminal history or past, nor did any, she wasn't acting like bizarre. There was nothing leading up to the days and hours of this crime that would suggest that anything was wrong with her or Joel. In fact, it said that her and Joel had a great evening that night, that her best friend Trina and her children were over at Julie and Joel's house, and the 2 women spent the whole night scrapbooking while the kids played together. And then at some point in the night, Trina had packed up her kids and they went home, and then Joel got ready for bed. The police began an investigation into the murder, so no arrests were made immediately. And the investigation took about a year before any arrests were completed. During the investigation, the police discovered the murder weapon, which was a butcher knife that had been taking off the knife block in the kitchen of the home. So the murder weapon came from inside the home. However, there were no fingerprints found on the knife, which, like, okay, that is kind of weird because you would think Julie's fingerprints would be on it, but I mean, I guess if she never used it. I definitely have knives in here that I've never even opened them, like they're still in the box. And because the police failed to do like basic police work in the initial search of the property, they had very little to go on, very little information. They never dusted Joel's room for fingerprints or DNA. They never dusted the butcher block that the knife was pulled from for any fingerprints or DNA. They did not preserve critical traces of evidence that could have been found on Joel's bed sheets and bedspread and his blanket and his pajamas. Instead, they focused their efforts on Julie. They were looking for anything, any remnants of blood that she could have washed away. They dug up her septic tank, inspected her sink, shower, and drains, and examined clothes in her washing machine. Like, they were looking at any utilities that you would use to clean anything. You know, the sinks, the drains, the washer, dryer. They examined that, trying to find or make the connection that she did it and she was covering up evidence somehow. Could you imagine? You wake up and find somebody standing over your only child's bed, pursuing a fight, getting beat up, and then being considered for committing the murder yourself. They went to her house and spread a chemical called luminol around, which detects the presence of blood. They went and spread it all around her house and came up with nothing, which is just like, duh, goofy. Nor could they find any type of motive for why in life she would want to kill her son. Just like, also, duh, goofy. Following the attack, Julie said that she could not be alone. Like, she was pretty much terrified all the time. You know, she had an apartment on campus that was an hour and a half away from her house, so she was making that drive sometimes alone, and she got so afraid that she actually ended up getting a protective dog. She kind of had a rotation of friends that would come stay with her around the clock so that she was never alone in her apartment, even while she slept. And even though she had a friend with her, she slept with the lights on all the time. In the year 2000, 3 years later, on October 12th, on the day before the anniversary of her son's death, police came to Julie Rea's campus at Indiana University and arrested her for the charge of murder for her son. 3 days later, she won a venue change to be transferred to Wayne County of Illinois instead of Indiana. Despite not having any evidence or motive, Julie was tried on capital charges. A few months later, in June 2000, a criminal defense attorney by the name of Bill Clutter was contacted on behalf of Julie. And upon hearing the details of the case and a description of the attacker for the first time, he instantly thought of another case that sounded just eerily similar to this one. There was a child serial killer who had recently been arrested for a similar crime in Texas. He said the description of the intruder, the MO, the method of the murder sounded identical to this other case that had just happened, of a child killer who recently confessed to a crime named Tommy Sells. According to Tommy, on New Year's Eve of 1999, which was 2 years after the attack on Julie and her son, Joel, Tommy broke into the home of a family in Del Rio, Texas, around the same time, 4:30 in the morning, and brutally stabbed their 13-year-old daughter, while the rest of the family unfortunately slept through the entire attack. Another child who was also in Texas, named Crystal, who was only 10 years old at the time, just like Joel, was also attacked and stabbed in her sleep. He actually slit her throat, but she actually survived the attack in some miraculous turn of events and was able to identify Tommy Lynn Sells as her attacker, and that is how he was caught. He was arrested, he pled guilty, he had confessed to these crimes, and was sentenced to death row in the state of Texas. Upon reading Julie's case and her story, this defense attorney Clutter, he suggested that her defense team look into this other person as a suspect because it sounds just like his style, method, everything. It sounds like he committed this murder. Julie's trial began on February 21st of 2002 in Wayne County. The prosecution's principal evidence was that Julie was in the house at the time of the attack, which is like, duh. Where else would she be if her son was in the house? They also hinted at the fact that maybe her motive was due to the bitter custody battle that her and her ex-husband had been, battling out for a few years prior to that. So during the trial, the prosecution team really tried to focus on this method of testing a crime scene called blood stain pattern analysis, which is rooted in the belief that drops of blood, like splatters and trails of blood kind of going throughout a crime scene, are huge pieces of information that can be used to reverse construct and even re-engineer crime scenes. So basically, when somebody commits a crime, they can then go back and drop blood splatters in a way that would confuse the detectives at the crime scene and make it look like something else happened other than what happened. So they were basically trying to say that Julie tried to make it look like somebody intruded and went through the house and dripped blood all over to corroborate that story. The only issue with this method of thinking is that the people who are investigating this crime are law officers, not scientists, who would have the correct skills and information and knowledge and experience to identify the difference between blood that had actually been splattered versus somebody who did it on purpose. So in this case, in the case of Julie, she had a t-shirt that had a bunch of blood on it, which nearly all of the blood that was found on her shirt belonged to her. Because if you remember, she got in a tussle, had a big old wound on her arm, and it caused a bunch of blood. But a tiny smear on the right shoulder was found to be that of her son Joel. And because of this, it created a small link to Joel. However, common sense would tell you that it was likely that Joel's blood had gotten on her shirt after she fought with the intruder, because he was covered in Joel's blood. Wow, that is so pretty. This is gonna be my New Year's Eve look for real. I'm gonna have to recreate this because this is cute. The prosecution had called in 2 blood stain pattern analysts who testified that there was no intruder. However, if you remember, these analysts and specialists are just police officers, not scientists or specialists. They're going solely off of what they see, and this particular form of evidence has been found to often be tainted with bias and personal perspective. He basically said that she staged the scene and that there was never a struggle with any intruder. And this is going off of his many years of experience and seeing so many other crime scenes like this. Not off anything scientific or proven by any sort of expert, solely off the opinion of this officer who has seen crimes like this before. Prosecutors then went on to try to evoke some sort of emotional manipulation with the jury. Mind you, this case was taking place in southern Illinois, which is a pretty conservative place. They had her ex-husband testify that at one point in time, way back when, Julie considered getting an abortion. Julie denied these claims while she was on the stand. You know, she said that she came from a very religious family and she denied ever having thoughts or ever considering getting an abortion when she got pregnant, because this case took place in such a rural southern area. Abortion is a controversial topic in that space and was fiercely opposed by like an overwhelming majority of the county. On March 4th of 2002, Julie Rea was found guilty for the murder of her 10-year-old son Joel and was sentenced to 65 years in prison. Now, if you remember, Julie was originally charged with a capital crime, with a capital offense. So she was originally being pursued for the death penalty, but she basically spent her life savings trying to obtain counsel that was, you know, experienced, effective, and necessary for a capital trial. And because they basically didn't want to give her the resources that she needed, the prosecution was like, oh, don't worry about that, you don't gotta do that. Like, we'll lower the sentence from a death sentence to a life term. Therefore, she was not able to receive the counsel of somebody who would be more experienced and have more knowledge and information of the next level, like somebody who would be defending a capital charge. On May 31st in 2002, just weeks after Julie was sentenced, ABC had a show called 2020, and they actually interviewed Julie and actually aired an episode based on her story. A woman named Diane Fanning, who was a true crime author who specifically told the story of Tommy Lynn Sells and had like regular correspondence with him. Upon watching Julie's episode, Diane reaches out to Tommy and without telling him the details of the crime or the timeline, she just asked him like, did you commit another crime 2 days before you went to Missouri and committed this crime? Like, did you attack somebody else? And he confirmed, and he was like, yeah, I did, in Illinois. A year later, Diane Fanning published a book called Through the Window, in which she details his confession to committing the murder of Joel, Rea's son, and the crime for which Julie was convicted on. Now remember, Bill Clutter was the original prosecutor who suggested that they look at this man for this crime. He was the director of the investigations for the Innocence Project, and because he had identified this so soon, he decided to take on the case himself. After reading Diane's book and finding out, that this man had confessed to the murder, he was like, oh yeah, let's do it. So upon starting the investigation, the Innocence Project came across a man named Alan Berkshire who saw Tommy Sells in Lawrenceville the weekend that Joel was murdered. They also got a testimony of a woman named Sandra who reported selling a bus ticket to Tommy in a town called Winnemucca, Nevada. Hopefully I said that right. 2 days after Joel was killed, which is significant because Texas Rangers were able to place Tommy Sells there. He was obviously traveling by bus, and so this man was basically going from the Midwest all the way to the West Coast by bus and stopping places and murdering children along the way. Texas Ranger John Allen reviewed the evidence gathered, and based on what he was able to put together, he was convinced that Tommy Sells' confession to murdering Joel was accurate and genuine, and that he actually did it. Meanwhile, on October 24th in 2003, the Innocence Project began presenting to the Prisoner Review Board on behalf of Julia. They actually had Diane come testify, the author of the book who received the confession from Tommy Sells. They had the testimony of the ranger who placed him in Nevada 2 days after, and the woman who sold him the bus ticket. They had all this evidence. So the review board was like, all right, we need to hear this confession ourselves. So some Illinois State Police actually traveled to Texas on November 6th of 2003 and audio recorded an interview that they did with Tommy Sells, in which he said that during a struggle with the woman, she clung onto his leg and as he dragged her through the house. And this made sense when a nurse who evaluated Julie the day of the attack testified that Julie had rug burns on her legs from being dragged through the house. Now, because this case started getting so much publicity, this put a lot of pressure on the mayor. Public opinion and influence can play a huge role in these, in a negative way and sometimes in a positive way. Bringing awareness puts pressures on the politicians to act, and so that's what was happening in this case. And because of it, the mayor and police chief started looking into the investigation and into how these claims could even be a thing. How could this woman possibly be innocent? And they started evaluating the officers and people who were investigating the crime at the time, and they actually started suggesting that the Lawrence County Sheriff falsely testified at Julie's first trial. You see, the deputy who was the first to arrive to the scene made no report about searching the backyard for footprints or any evidence of another person being there or of an intruder. However, the sheriff at the time testified that he did shine a flashlight in the backyard over the wet grass that was covered in dew and couldn't find any evidence of footprints or of an intruder being there, which is just crazy to think, because Julie said that they were in a struggle, like they were fighting, and he was dragging her through the house, and they fought all the way into the backyard. So you would think that even if this deputy didn't do like a thorough search and actually walk out and look around the yard, it would be clear that something happened. Like Julie, her head was slammed into the ground in the backyard, and there was blood from her head on her t-shirt. So that tells me that she was bleeding from the time that he slammed. So you would think that there would be evidence of this in the backyard. And so for the deputy to say that he shined his flashlight on the wet dew and didn't see anything, only to later find out that he had no report of ever even looking at the backyard. This statement that he says was contradicted by a neighbor who said that he walked in the backyard and the grass was dry. So if the deputy walked back there on the wet dew and didn't see any signs of a struggle, why would the grass be dry? After Julie was convicted, she remarried, and her new husband, Mark Harper, he believed her, you know, from the beginning, but he actually contacted a meteorologist who reviewed the weather from the day of the attack. The expert concluded that there would have been no dew on the ground that morning. That in fact, what the neighbor had reported was true, that the ground would have been dry. This was key evidence that was known by the prosecution team that was never told in court. In fact, the deputy with the flashlight who had said that he saw the dew on the ground had actually been recorded saying this in an interview, and they never presented the interview at the hearing. They hid it from the defense team. Bruh, you would think that the first thing you would do was go outside. If she said that she had a struggle all the way from inside the house to outside the house, you would think that you would go check out the whole crime scene. But it was like their intention when they first arrived on the scene was to start pointing fingers at Julie. Like, they never believed her from the first second, and had already made up their mind about what happened, and that's what they were looking for, and that's what they wanted to see, and so that's what they saw, and that's what they reported on, things that would further corroborate what they already believed to be true, despite what was actually there and could have been actually seen in front of them. So after presenting all of this evidence to the prison review board on June 24th, 2004, the appellate court vacated Julie's charges and ordered an immediate release. However, just right as she took her first steps out of prison, the prosecutors literally re-arrested her because they didn't believe that she was innocent, because they didn't want to own up to their mistakes. There were news and media everywhere around upon Julie coming out, and so everybody saw this, and people in the community actually rallied and raised about $75,000 in less than a week to bail Julie out, and prosecutors sought to convict her again. However, given the confession and all of the evidence, on July 26th of 2006, Julie Rea was found not guilty of murdering her son. The original crime happened in 1997, and it wasn't until 2006 that Julie was found innocent. First and foremost, this woman lost her son and almost lost her life. Like, she started fighting with the man who hurt her son. And then, despite her telling people what happened, people just completely glossed over the fact that she was talking and came up with their own story and their own narrative, which was that she is the one who committed the murder to her baby. Then they put her ass in jail for it, in prison, and publicized the case so that everybody knew what she was being accused of. And all the while, she is a victim too. On November 29th of 2010, Julie Rea was granted a certificate of innocence and was awarded, I guess, a nice chunk of change, but it's literally like, that's what it is. It's a chunk of change. Now remember, I said I'm not going to say exactly how much people got, but it wasn't enough for what she went through. Not even enough to buy a house. That's how much she didn't receive. Y'all put this woman through literally hell. Literally hell. She called y'all for help, and you guys tried to convince the world that she murdered her son. And then that just contributed to allowing the man who actually did it to go on to commit 3 more murders that they know of. The man is a serial killer, so I wouldn't be surprised if he committed significantly more than that. Since the case of Joel and Julie, people have seriously put into question the validity of the bloodstain pattern theory and effectiveness. The Texas Forensic Science Commission determined that bloodstain pattern analysis that is used to reconstruct a crime scene must be performed by an individual or organization who is accredited, and not any individual person who is a self-proclaimed expert, like a cop. And only then is that evidence allowed to be presented in court. That is encouraging, all other states to follow suit and make this a thing, so that police officers have less power in pushing their own agendas onto people in their real lives. Since her exoneration, Julie Rea has become an advocate, working with organizations that help women who have been wrongfully convicted of crimes and who are fighting to prove their innocence. Tommy Sells was never formally convicted of Joel's murder. Wow, okay, so I started re-recording on my phone because my camera died, and apparently nothing that I've said in the past 10 minutes has been recorded because I forgot to push record. So we're gonna try this again. Tommy Sells was never convicted of Joel's murder. He was already serving a death sentence for 3 other murders that he had confessed to. And so he was actually executed in Texas in 2014 through lethal injection. But it's still kind of like, is that really justice? In 2010, Julie Rea hosted the first ever Women and Innocence conference in the state of Michigan, where they had all of the female exonerees from the entire nation present and, you know, politicking, talking, meeting each other, sharing stories. They had guest speakers from the Innocence Project. Their founder actually was one of the guest speakers. And she just kind of spearheaded bringing all of these women together and continuing the conversation of how to be effective in this area of the justice system and how they can, you know, help other women who are going through what they have been through as far as being wrongfully convicted of things. Julie continued to work in the field of wrongful convictions and activism, seeking to promote a more humane and rational answer to crimes that occur for both guilty and not guilty people. Like, she just really doesn't want anybody to ever experience what she went through, even if they are guilty. Like, she says that nobody deserves to go through what she went through. And I mean, she's not wrong. She has 2 websites that you can go visit to check her out if you want to support or if you know anybody who would need legal assistance. Her professional website is called Rea Mitigation and Witness Preparation Counseling. Today, Rea belongs to a growing community of, you know, victims of the United States justice system, specifically those who have been prosecuted under false evidence, as according to the blood pattern, drip, DNA, whatever. Of 362 people who have been exonerated in the United States based on DNA tests, faulty forensic evidence has contributed to over half of those cases, of those exonerations. And reeling from abuse that she encountered in prison, she said that being branded a child killer separated her from society and caused significant problems for her in jail, in prison, where they really don't appreciate those kind of people. As you can see, I just wrapped my hair and I'm just gonna wear it down and straight. And she basically said she wears a scarlet letter. Nothing will ever make that go away. Once that's the thing, like with these cases, often once they're publicized, people form their own opinion and they really don't let you live it down. And so there's really not a lot that you can do to escape the narrative that, you know, you receive or that people once believe. Like, it's hard for people to change their mind after being convinced that of something so awful. Yeah, that's the story of Julie Rea. Rest in peace to her son Joel. I mean, that is awful what happened to him. Rest in peace to the other children that were murdered by Tommy Sells. What do you guys think? I mean, I think Julie Rea is just like insanely strong and insanely just brave. Please don't do that. Just brave for using her experience to help and empower other women who may or may not suffer the same fate at the hands of the same justice system that did this to Julie and her family. I think it's just super impressive that she has continued on and channeled all of that energy and power into fighting for people. Because, I mean, Lord, there is really no right or wrong way to handle a situation like what she has been through. I don't know, in my mind, I guess it's just baffling how people didn't believe her, because this isn't like a situation that you can make up in your head. Like, a man, an intruder came in and murdered your son and you fought him, and that would leave for just a crazy crime scene, like stuff everywhere. She was battered. She had bruises and abrasions, and she ran next door in the middle of the night and woke up this woman. Like, nothing about this seems like a situation that can be made up. You know, why would she run next door and call the police? I don't know. It's just wild to think that something so awful happened to her. And the moment that she told the police, they didn't believe her. Like, right off the bat. Like, she really never had a chance. And I don't know. I think that's just so crazy. It sounds like she's doing a lot of really good work to help other people. And that's cool and awesome, because, yeah, I don't know. You got to be a special kind of human to be able to take that pain and turn it into grace and put that energy back into the system that traumatized you in such an awful way. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. I'm interested to know your guys' thoughts and what you think about the case and how everything played out from the beginning to the end. With that being said, I just want to wish you guys a very happy new year. And, you know, I wish you guys an abundance of energy to figure out what you want in life, or figure out what is in the way of getting what you want and attaining it. Godspeed to all of you, and I will see you guys in the new year. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, for watching my video. If you like this content, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts on this case specifically. If you have anybody that you want me to talk about, comment below. I'll bet you guys have a great rest of your day, a happy new year, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.